we're going to continue on and have a little bit of a reflection on the presentations that you've just seen. And I want to mention to all of those people watching online that you are invited to participate in this discussion. I believe we'll start with our panel, and then there's going to be opportunities for everyone in the audience to participate and ask you questions or offer your ideas and comments. And certainly online you can just indicate that you have a question, and Nick will convey it on your behalf. So I'm very pleased that we have this excellent panel put together. All of these people were asked on rather short notice to come and give their thoughts and impressions. So they're not listed with biographies in your programs. So we'll be introducing each of them. But the first victim is your moderator, Marcus Youssef, who officially agreed to do this about 5 o'clock this morning, or maybe that's when we just kind of sealed the deal. But Marcus is Artistic Director of New World Theatre, Chair of the Vancouver Creative Space Society, and co-founder of the East Van artist-run production studio, Progress Lab 1422. Marcus is currently in his second term on the City of Vancouver's Arts and Culture Policy Council after he was chair in the previous term. He has a deep interest in both the collaborative process and policy development, and particularly how one influences the other. Please welcome Marcus Youssef.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, we had extensive negotiations at 4:30 this morning about this panel. So thanks so much, everybody. I know it's home stretch here, so we're into the final hour. So we'll try to keep it as kind of snappy and moving forward as possible. It is actually a terrific pleasure to be here. I actually have a question. As I was listening, I was thinking of my first term on the Arts and Culture Policy Council, in which I somewhat naively and perhaps a bit egotistically succumbed to some pressure to stand for chair, trying to learn one of the first phrases I felt like I had to learn as somebody who is interested in politics and interested in government and the interface between what we do and government. One of the first phrases I felt like I had to understand was high level. And as I was watching, I was thinking of that phrase and thinking about high level and how I think I kind of discovered that high level in government cultural policy relationships means something kind of generic and vague enough that it doesn't feel like it's going to get anybody in trouble politically, and also doesn't imply that anybody might have to spend any money. That those are that is, I think, actually the definition of high level. And I mean, I'm making a bit of a joke, obviously, but at the same time, it's a real skill. And I would argue deeply, deeply necessary. I'm never putting deep in a biography that I write ever again. I'm just deep. That's what it is. So I actually was thinking about that and thinking about this particular challenge that we face with as a community in our attempts to interface with government. And so I'm really, really pleased and excited to be here. I'm also pleased and excited to be sitting with the folks who were also asked on rather short notice, but are a terrific gang of people. So I'm going to ask them to come up. Panelists, if you could join us up here and grab a seat, that would be terrific. I'll introduce them as soon as they get up here. Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, why not, eh? Why not? As they get settled, a quick question. For those, just literally to kind of gauge the room for us up here, who's kind of in the policy wonk kind of camp, i.e. listening to high-level discussion is exciting, and you're like, this is awesome, I love it. Okay, that's good, it's about half. And who's snoozeville with high-level kind of stuff? Who goes snoozy? Be honest. I go kind of back, okay, so it's a kind of half and half crowd. That's good. That's good to know. We're joined by a terrific bunch of panelists here. On my right, with the beard, I'm going to go in order that I got my paper here. It'll be easier. With the beard, the only beard, is Kevin McKeown, who you guys know, Director of Community Engagement for the Alliance, and also producer of this summit. Hold your applause, please, till we get to the end. He's, in addition to all that work and his work with, as everybody's done here, where's Howard? Oh, there. Howard. Howard. Come on. Just because you're a big shot academic doesn't mean you can show up late. Kevin's produced this, and like most folks, I think maybe except Howard, he served on the Creative Convergence report panel. So that's Howard. Kevin, Howard Jang is, thank you, right next to me. He's the director of the SFU Woodward's Cultural Unit. Most of us know Howard, and a member of the Board of Directors of Canada Council for the Arts and several other boards and advisory councils for funding bodies. Essentially, whether you know it or not, Howard is in some way your boss. He was also one of the first to agree to be a part of the steering committee that launched this process. Totally thrilled to have Beng Favreau with us from Haida Gwaii, where she's the Executive Director of Literacy there and sits on the board also of the Haida Gwaii Community Arts Council, I believe. Is that correct? Yeah? So thrilled to have you all the way. Any number of times I've heard Alliance folks talk about the generosity they felt they received when they came up to Haida Gwaii from you folks. So it's a real pleasure to have you here, Beng. Zaina Campbell. A little wave is good, is the BC Program Officer for the Dancer Transition Resource Center. She's also a singer. She's an SFU grad with extensive experience in grant research and policy, both from her position when she worked for the Department of Canadian Heritage, as well as many other contexts. And finally, Minna Schendlinger. I actually know Minna really well, so I should get her name right.
Do you want to try this? No.
Is the facility manager of the Post at 750, which, as many of you will know, we're a little resentful of the Post at 750 at Progress Lab 1422. We used to be the cool new space collective hub. Now they are at 750 Hamilton Street. It's an extraordinary initiative if you haven't had a chance to check it out. She was formerly managing director of the Push Festival, as well as former chair here at the Alliance. So welcome to our panel. One more round of applause. Why not? Okay, so just before we launch into the questions, and Rob suggested a place that we start, and I will accept that. Just to kind of lay maybe a kind of value or something for the top, because like I think it is important that we interrogate this a little bit and interrogate what can we do going forward? How do we make this a useful process? Is it useful at all? Et cetera, and do all that stuff. But I do think that there's something that, and this may be obvious, but there's something that should be recognized, and I don't know. I think it can be easy in these kind of contexts, given our propensity as a community to interrogate, not to appreciate necessarily or remember necessarily the enormous amount of work and labor that went into this, preparing this report and preparing. So a round of applause, first of all, of that. And if we could just generally keep that in mind, right, when we have the much better ideas for all the things that should have been done, if we could try as best we can to remember the deep commitment and the deep kind of passion that we saw reflected in some of the presentations about it, that's kind of underneath this. I tend to be an active moderator. That's the other thing. You guys feel free to tell me to back off. Like I've said that to a couple of you, and I'm really serious about that. Same when we open it up to you. I will go, what do you mean? And so you can feel free to say, no, Marcus, shut up for a second and let me talk. Okay, so where Rob wanted us to start, and it makes a lot of sense to me, is with the slide he missed. He just said to me a second ago, is that there was a final slide that I think that he didn't get to, which is, and I do think he's right, it's pretty relevant. It's 3 things the Alliance is prepared to do now. And it actually dovetails pretty closely to the question I was going to ask Rob as well, which is like, what do you want from us? Right? Like, you're the ones with this in your head. Like, we care, but it's not in our heads. And so he suggested to me, Rob suggested to me, Kevin, that you would be prepared to kind of run us through the 3 things that the Alliance is now prepared to do.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm a little alarmed now because I didn't know there was a precise count of 3 things.
So Rob said, I'm just the messenger. As he said, I'm the messenger for the message.
Because what I was prepared to say here in response to the question, what's next, is that at just about every one of the roundtables at some point towards the end, someone would say, well, what's next? What are you going to do with this? So we're doing all of these conversations. You're going to create this report. You're going to create a document. We've all sort of been through this before in one form or another, and then we have a document, and then it sits on a shelf, and that's the end of the story. And so I related this to something that an attendee at one of the roundtables, a woman spoke up at this point, and she said that she had spent 30 years in elected office at one level or another, and that she was advising us that nothing will happen with this document, nothing will happen at Cabinet, nothing will happen with the government unless we hold their feet to the fire. Unless we, I'm old and I don't really care. I'm not very diplomatic about these things anymore. That's really the message that we heard. We were told by this woman, I'm sorry I don't remember her name, she was very well spoken on the subject. She said, unless caucus hears from your MLA frequently about this, and the Cabinet hears from caucus frequently about this, nothing will go forward. But if your MLAs on the ground are constantly reminded that you took part in this process, that you care about this document, and that you want to see some action, they will keep going to caucus and saying, what is this about a cultural policy thing? Where every time I go back to my writing, somebody buttonholes me, or I'm invited to some sort of event, or I get a presentation from a group, and obviously my constituents care about this. What is this about? What are we doing? We, the government, doing about this? And she added, and I added at subsequent roundtables when I talked about this, that it's your MLAs and it's your civic elected officials as well. The Union of BC Municipalities has a very big voice in Victoria, and your local councillors and mayor are very involved in that. So what the Alliance is proposing to do next, and I don't know if this is one,
let's call it one.
But we'll call it one, and maybe if Rob can add two more, inventing more work for us. We are proposing to work with our colleagues and the many, many people that we've met over the last 5 months of this process to create, formulate, well, we haven't given it an official name yet, but it's going to be a network of community cultural advocates. Perhaps Cheryl can come up with yet another snappy name for us. And we're going to work with those people across the province to develop strategies and toolkits for them to make sure that their MLAs and their elected officials at every level never stop hearing about this and our concerns and our need for action. And that's going to be the big what's next step.
So what I'm hearing there is like the development of a kind of semi-formal kind of cultural advocacy network across the province.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Exactly. Now, Rob may have something to add.
Well, I think you covered it because the slide was about the establishment of that network of advocates, and then working collaboratively with them to prepare toolkits, and then to use that collectively to mobilize engagement with elected officials.
Right. So yeah. So that, I mean, that seems clear. Like it's like a cultural advocacy network and trying to pressure government and apply pressure to government at various levels.
And we'll be looking to all of you to be part of that network.
Okay, great. So that is a terrific place to kind of begin. So that's kind of the proposal from the Alliance, right? Is that we've done this tremendous amount of work, and that this is how we think we can move it forward. I'm going to go to the panel first, and really anybody at this point, we'll give everybody a chance, but anybody who wants to jump in on this, right? So that's the proposal from the Alliance, and I guess the question in some ways is like, what do you think of that? The question is also like, how do we take that and do something with it if it's not the way these guys are proposing, I suppose? And like what I don't know, that's it. Like how do we make use of this document or can we make use of this document? Does anybody want to jump in on that? You don't have to.
Well, Howard,
Somebody has
Howard's
to.
sitting
I have no idea what to say. A tremendous amount of work has been done, and I will say that I was skeptical, and so I was unsure about really what the results of all this was going to be. And having seen the presentation just now, just earlier, is really quite impressive. Having said that, because you told me to be really respectful of the work that was...
You did. That was like really respectful.
And I am, absolutely, and enormously. You know, there's areas of consultation and, voices is probably a better word, that are absolutely missing in this document.
Okay, so what do you think those are?
Well, so next steps for the Alliance or for the group or for whatever would be, this needs to be socialized. This needs to be socialized with other sectors.
I don't know what you mean by that.
The private sector is absent entirely of voice in terms of really understanding, and with any kind of advocacy effort or movement, you really need to begin to socialize. Is this going to make sense? Is this the kind of approach that actually resonates for you? It's the people that aren't as invested as everyone in this room is. To really understand whether or not this is something that the people of British Columbia actually want.
Okay, good. Let's hold it there. So there's a suggestion about additional kind of content that's necessary to make this. But what do other folks think of that? Because honestly, I'm going to challenge maybe a little bit, Howard. My sense from what I saw and what I heard was that this is a document, and correct me if I'm wrong, primarily about interfacing with government. Like that is, it's kind of seems like it's stated goal and agenda. But I do want to open it up.
But that was the nature of the questions that were asked. The questions that were asked pointed all the answers to say, how do we talk to government? How do we...
Sure, fair enough.
But that's the shortness of the...
Okay, yeah, no, I think that point is taken. Absolutely, that point is absolutely taken.
You asked me to be here.
Yeah, no, I think that point is taken. That's right. You're saying that's missing. But anybody else want to weigh in on like the suggestion around advocacy or this, I guess to some extent, this question about... Yeah, did you?
Sure.
Yeah.
I also agree. I'm so impressed by the work of my friends and colleagues and the extensive dedication. We're very grateful for that contribution. It's a good beginning. So if we talk about gaps, it's just only to improve things, move it forward, and focus on, what next? How can we complete the picture even just a little bit more now that all of this massive amounts of groundwork has been undertaken? So it seems to me that might be a next piece. I think early in the process, the intent was to start the conversation at a grassroots level so that we can set the tone and really sort of consult amongst ourselves what really seems a priority and important to us. And now there's a few different new questions that I find are useful to look at. Firstly, examining who did show up to the roundtables, who was really strongly represented, and who was maybe not as strongly represented within the discussions that we've summarized so far. If there are some areas where we could strengthen that consultation already still within our own communities, that's maybe a point towards a little bit more work to bring those perspectives on board. In addition to that, there's some questions for the panel about how do we engage with government, and the key missing piece on that regard is to have that conversation with our champions and supporters within government. I was very inspired to see that some of these same questions are coming up in Ontario. Some of the political leaders from that end talked about just the power of listening, the importance and the impact of knowing that you have a strong will and a strong diverse demographic of people who want this thing, and what is the deliverable that you're really looking for, what's your clear ask. And also learning more about what our partners and colleagues in the public sector, what are their challenges, what problems are they looking to solve. And part of the work that has been done so far, it really can inform that. We can talk to all the manifold ways that we are an answer to existing problems. We can present solutions.
Go ahead. Yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
In terms of socializing, I think that's the new buzz phrase, is it? Okay.
Scaling, actually. Officially scaling is the new buzzword, but anyway.
Yeah. I have to stay on top of these things. In terms of engaging beyond our own sector and sectors, absolutely. In advance of the roundtables, we made a point of making sure that regionally and locally that tourism and for-profit cultural businesses and chambers of commerce and local boards of trade and all of those sort of people were included. And of course, they don't see themselves immediately, many of them, in a conversation about cultural policy. But we did, at many of the roundtables, have people come from those sectors, from local chambers of commerce, private business persons that came and took part, and that would be part of, in my mind's eye, of the building out of that advocacy network, is going back to those people. And Amanda and I did have some conversations with some of them to say, we'll be looking for you to help us continue this dialogue into your sector, help us create opportunities for local cultural community people to make presentations to your Chamber of Commerce, to engage your business community, and so on, because it seems to me, as we got further and further into it, that they're going to be more responsive to the outreach from their local cultural community than they might be, say, from us here in Vancouver. So a point taken. Certainly there's a lot more work to be done, and that should be in terms of reaching across sectors and across ministries. That came up at all the roundtables, and that certainly needs to be a big part of the program.
Yeah, and I would argue important to take the, obviously Howard's in a great position to make a really cogent critique, but again, just to say what you said, Zaina, again, I think it's so crucial that we respect, when people go out and do a lot of work, we start with thanks and massage certificates for all the work that they did, right? And then we move to, you know what I mean, that's the play. I think it's actually it's a bit of a practice, and we have to do that. Zaina, I want to ask you a quick question, and I'd like to go to you guys, but a quick question, just in a word, really, does Kevin's and the Alliance's proposal around trying to develop this cultural advocacy network facilitate, in your view, some of the work that you think you're suggesting needs to be done in terms of exchange and learning more and doing that kind of stuff? Briefly, if you could.
I think that's part of the solution.
Yeah.
And there may be other ways to approach it where you create a safe space for dialogue that's really collaborative.
Right.
So the two-pronged approach, I think, might be worth considering.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Zaina. So you got, Do you want to, go ahead.
For me, I guess I see myself and where Haidagwai fits is just one piece of a 3,000-piece puzzle, right? And we're far away, and I see myself having to work on that part quite a lot. I think first of all, we have to ensure that this framework is brought back to the Aboriginal people and have the input again, because I don't see a lot of representation here today as well, right? And same happened on the island. We didn't have a lot of big representation, and I think that's also a big key in that part. And definitely engage the schools to be the support and to be the advocates for us as well, because I think that it falls into many sectors, and not just ministries, not just different ministries, but schools. And then the councils, town councils, I think they are important too. For my, arts is just my volunteer work. Haidagwai Arts Council is just a 100% volunteer-based society. We don't, the funding we get is just channeled to programs. So how we then actually approach that is through a lot of energy and volunteers. So I think that model doesn't work for a lot of people in different areas. We totally understand that. But I do find that for rural areas, we need to ensure that their voices are also heard, and I do want to stress that's where I come from.
Cool, great. Minna, do you want to weigh in on this, or should we move to something else?
Can you repeat the question?
Well, the question was what do you think of the Alliance proposed, and again, I think largely in terms of interfacing with government and trying to move culture up the chain, the food chain at government, at the province, as a kind of cultural advocacy network across the province.
Yeah.
So that's A, what do you think of that? B is kind of okay, so what happens next?
Yeah.
And I mean, you're pretty well positioned to do, you've been involved in this process for a long time.
Yeah.
You're pretty well positioned to answer that question, in your own way, I think.
Yeah. The cultural arts community, especially locally in Metro Vancouver, which is definitely more my bailiwick than anything outside the region, is historically dreadful at advocating for itself outside of its own community. We're great at getting together and hanging out and going, yeah, money, yeah, collaboration, yeah. And then we go back to our jobs and slog away, and then we forget that we're supposed to, call up our MLA and go, you need to support this thing. Like, I remember going to some event, I can't remember what it was, shortly after Spencer Chandra Herbert was elected his first term. He was here. Is he still here?
No, he's not here.
Okay. And he said well, he said to the group of people who were gathered that in his first few weeks on the job, he heard more from the sport fishing lobby than he heard from artists. About probably other people who were here were also in that room and remember that comment. And I remember being struck by that and thinking, well, but we all get together in these rooms and we bitch and moan about what's not happening, and then we don't, some of us, me included, don't actually go out and make things happen. So I agree that some sort of advocacy network is absolutely critical to move this thing forward. What my question really back to the Alliance is this the thing that we're moving forward? Or is there something else that this is going to turn into, that's going to get moved forward, that's going to have corporate, whatever you want to call it, voice, and a bigger Aboriginal voice, a bigger, whatever voice. So my questions are around that. And I mean, this is 2 years of work, and it's a huge amount of work, and I'm super grateful for it, and super encouraged that it's really happening, because we talked about it for 5 years before that, and it never happened. So, but I want to know, is this the thing that I'm supposed to call up my MLA and say, this is the thing? What do I do with it?
So why don't we just literally ask the question, and maybe, Rob, is that the thing? And again, please try to keep your answer as brief as possible.
I just thought Lindy Sisson.
That's not a slight at you.
Lindy Sisson put her hand up, so
Lindy,
I don't know if there's, and there's some other
questions.
hands, so I don't know how the questions are working.
Rob, and then we'll go to you, Lindy. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's mics at the bottom of both aisles if you want to come down, but we'll also try to meet people up if we're moving into the crowd now.
Yeah, I didn't think we were there yet, but we are, so that's good.
There we are. And I think just my thinking on this, and I'm looking for everyone else's thoughts as well, is that this is a thing that we're moving forward, that this is a piece, because this is one consultation process and its outcomes that came from that constituency. And in addition to that, we have a lot of other things that we can use to move forward. And I think one of the challenges then is there ever going to be a single thing that we can just say, here it is, this is the one, final convergence of all things that we know, and we present it to the government. I think that really it's about being engaged in a conversation, so that when we have this thing, or when we have Kelly's reports in the fall that say where are we at, and what is the sector identifying as as challenges within, say, nonprofit arts organizations, which is one piece of the research that we're doing. What Judith's research is going to tell us in those big reports, what we have from a number of other sources that we can use to move forward, but every bit of it just has to be part of the conversation. I don't think there's
There's not a single thing. It's kind of the yeah.
And this was the thing we could bite off and chew.
Right. Absolutely. Lindy, do you want to jump in?
Okay. Sorry for jumping in. You didn't really put it out here. Except for this big giant gap that I just had to point out. We're taking this forward as a cultural community. We just heard that Ontario's government is the one that's moving it forward. Before we have anybody advocate for this, I think we have to be working with government, check in with them, say this is what we've got so far, Now, what are you bringing to the table? How are you going to participate with us? That's our first, so I wouldn't want, and I don't think this is the plan, but before we get ahead of ourselves, let's not go advocating, I was at this summit, and here's the document, and what are you doing about it? And then they go to the minister, and she goes, I really don't know what you're talking about. So we have to get them into the conversation, and I think the fire has to be lit that they, what are their priorities too, and work together on those.
Sure. So, right, great. So ensuring government. So that's a suggestion. Ensuring government is aware, at least. Yeah. So there's I've seen several around. Feel free to come up here too if you want to do that. I know it's better to have Amanda, run around and give you the mic. But you can come up here. Oh, there, Rob. Okay. And then, so up top in the back, and then you. Thanks.
Okay. So as somebody that did facilitated 4 of the roundtables and participated in 4 other ones, I feel like I was part of the process. So thank you to all the other people that did all this work. But I just wanted, because I want this to be the best document possible, this is the first time I've seen it, and I think that before we say, let's work on a plan to push this onto the politicians, I think we need to I haven't read the 26 pages yet, and I'd like to make sure that everybody is in agreement that this is what should be put forward. And I think, and then my thinking has been formulated, my thoughts have been formulated through my discussions with some of the folks from the First Peoples Cultural Council on some of the roundtables that I've done. And I'd like to suggest that, because it kept coming up under all the goals, is that first, the need to pay homage to our First Nations cultures, is that perhaps that a goal 6 is actually needed to this, for preserving, nurturing, and understanding First Nations culture in this province, because I think First Nations culture is a parallel and powerful artistic culture, not so much an influence on the rest of the culture in our province. It's distinct in and of itself, and it's our organic culture. It's sprung from BC. It is this is the only place in the world that it exists, and that if it's not identified as a single issue or as a goal to preserve and protect and enhance, I think we're missing the boat there.
Great, thank you. And so just to suggest as a way of thinking about what's happening right now, we'll keep taking these suggestions, it feels like feedback on the document, right? And then check in with you guys about your reactions, right? Just if there's anything specific that comes up. And then we'll maybe move to a second set of questions, which is less about what these guys need to do and more about then what we might be able to do, and so we'll look at it that way. Okay? I'm going to take Kevin. I'm just going to take the person in front there. Yeah.
Hi. Just one quick observation, and I know this is, again, congratulations to everyone who worked on this. This is
the nicest panel ever.
It is the nicest panel ever. But just my 9 to 5 job is in government in a completely different industry. But I know just from scanning this over a couple of minutes, what's missing, not content-wise at all, is a numbering system for sections, paragraphs, bullet points.
There's something practical.
Okay. If you bring this to a politician, they're not going to have any context for referring to page 6, bullet point 7. That doesn't fly. You need to be able to say, section 2, section 2.1.4 states that blah, 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 and this is consistent with your policy and could help. So we need to be able to bring forward specific aspects of this document to politicians in context to their portfolios, and to be able to refer to specific points in this document.
Absolutely.
So I just think that's a necessary layer that might be worth.
Terrific. No, I think it's really clear. And to be fair to these guys, I know it's in a draft stage, but absolutely. And just quickly on that, just what we discovered at the Arts and Culture Policy Council, like I think one of the, well, I'm not going to say only, most productive things that we did was, in our first term, was taking the language from the city culture plan and actually looking for places where we could insert it into other existing plans, like the economic plan, the greenest city. Do you know what I mean? Like that it was that step, which is kind of a mirror in some ways of what you're saying, that started to feel like it was actually super productive. But thank you. That's great. Kevin, you wanted to jump in on something?
To add to what Rob said, and to answer a couple of the points that have been made, is that certainly in my mind's eye, as this progressed, I never thought of what we would present here today as being a final document, which is what we would then advocate for. I've always felt that this was a very organic process, that the next level of vetting of this is all of you and the 600-odd people who took part in the roundtables, who will have an opportunity to see this online. And I expect that we'll have a lot of feedback, a lot of useful suggestions, a lot of new points and things to think about, like a proper numbering system for the points in the document. So no, I've not ever, not that this is mine, but I, in the process, never imagined that what we were presenting here today was a fait accompli. This is it, folks. This is the voice of the province. And Lindy's absolutely right. We need more work. It'll be a parallel track as we begin the advocacy process, that the work is in progress, because part of that is, as has been pointed out, engaging the government. Unfortunately, we don't have as much government representation here today as we have had in previous summits, but we have since the very beginning been in dialogue with the ministry, with the BC Arts Council, who can't be with us this week because they're having one of their meetings up in the interior, but they have all been very much involved in this process and will continue to be so. And at the very beginning of this conversation in 2013, Jillian Wood said to me, when I invited her to come to that summit in 2013 to do a presentation, she thought about it, she got back to me, and she said, Kevin, I think our job at this point is to start thinking about how we will receive what you bring forward and then work together with you on that. So that absolutely right about the necessity to have that dialogue with the government before we begin any sort of hardball lobbying advocacy work. And I'd just like to add to Kathy's point about the need to go back to, as Beng said, the First Nations community and a lot of other communities and sectors, as Howard underlined, is critical, and greater engagement and conversation with the First Nations communities is paramount. I'd just like to mention that this came up again at just about every roundtable, and Kathy will remember that in Nanaimo, the woman Geraldine Manson, who gave the First Nations welcome to the Nanaimo roundtable, said something that really touched me and clarified a lot of things for me when she said, in her words, she said, we have to reach a point and a place where the First Nations culture is not something separate over here that's just ours. We've got to reach a point where we understand that it is British Columbia's cultural heritage and living culture, and it is in many senses all of ours to share and to support and to engage and to celebrate. And it was something that I had been feeling for a long time. It was for her to say, not for me, and everywhere we went, we saw that in various degrees, and in Haida Gwaii we saw it lived day to day. That's the way it is in Haida Gwaii. So, and that really confirmed for me what Geraldine had said to us in Nanaimo. So Kathy's absolutely right about that too.
Thank you, Kevin. And there was a suggestion from the floor for making it one of the fundamental, whatever, which is great to have. And sorry to interrupt, but I want to keep us. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to yak. Anything before we move? Anything from anybody else on the panel on either of those suggestions? I'm going to throw in one thing. And sorry, it's not really my role, but I'm going to throw in one thing. It's always interests me when we hit policy and we start writing policy. We lose the stories. And actually listening to you, Kevin, and you, Amanda, wherever you are, like tell some of the stories of like what you encountered that surprised you, as opposed to like arts and culture are good, like the things I know already that you'll say. Some of those were really beautiful. I'm not a policy writer. I mean, I'm trying to figure it out. I don't write policy, but there is something about, you asked me for the thing I wrote for the minister, right? Because that was personal, and there's something about those personal stories I think could be useful in terms of making the advocacy case. I would throw that out there. Okay, shifting gears. Yeah, go ahead.
Hold on, I'll give you the mic.
So aside from the advocacy mechanisms, getting advocates, groups that, what are the next steps for this specific document to get it to where we need it to be the final document that we want to push? Or is it going to be, are we going to be taking it piecemeal to create that final document?
Well, I think that's a great question. It's not something that I've given a lot of thought to. We've been pretty immersed in this process for the last 5 months. That, I hope, will come out of the conversations about advocacy and further engagement. And maybe Rob has some thoughts about that.
You know what, I'm actually going to hold off. I actually think that's a really fair answer, Kevin. It's an extremely fair answer, and it's actually a question in some ways we can turn to the panel, right? Like, and what should the next steps be? We've heard a little bit, or back on the audience, or back on to you, right? Like if people have specific ideas. Because I think it's absolutely fair to say we had our heads completely buried in making this thing for the last, 2 years. Anybody? Howard, I know you wanted to jump in on something. Is it unrelated?
Sort of related, I guess. Next steps moment. I think as I glance at the document and remember Rob's presentation, I'm struck with. That's a good recommendation. Now I see the next step being we should find out more about what those words are really telling us. For example, so I would actually going through the document right now just very quickly. There's several things here that jump out for me that say, I need to test that assumption or test why that recommendation makes sense at this time. So I think that's sort of the next step in my mind. We're still in that R&D phase. In my mind, we're still in that phase where we have some really good placeholders of thinking points right now, and now we need some ownership of the community that is sitting in this room and all around us working to say, this is one area that I think would be really important to make sure that this is the right kind of recommendation to make. And just going through that, there's some impact moments here where we're asking about, especially around the education areas, to really learn more about is that really the right lens in which we want to frame the policy around, that kind of. So those are, for me, the bigger next steps.
No, that's helpful, and I appreciate you being concise with that. Absolutely. Anybody else? Saying you were going to jump in, maybe, Minna? You guys?
Well, I guess agree with and add to that and along the lines of the question that you were asking, which I think was similar to the question I was asking, which is what is the piece that ultimately goes? And Rob, you said there will be sort of a series of pieces.
Just a thought.
What's that?
It's just a thought.
Just a thought.
That's why we're having this session, so we can hear how.
Yeah, exactly.
And somebody had, I can't remember who it was, somebody over there said something about, that the Ontario government is bringing forward, a policy piece for discussion. And Rob and I had that discussion ourselves individually about does it make sense for us as the cultural community to go to government and say, we think this should be policy, and try to figure out a way to sell it to the government so that they can, or do we engage them in conversation that makes them excited? And I think in order to do that, there is that cross-ministerial work which is referenced in this document about how to engage education, social services, what all of them, frankly, forestry and mining, what the hell, why not? Get them engaged, get them involved in how their sectors, how we cross over with them. I don't know what the right language is. I don't really care. But one of in terms of the missing stuff, and just something that just occurred to me, when we were talking about, there's not very much representation from the Aboriginal community, for instance, in this room. Presumably there was some in some of the rooms that Kevin and Amanda were in. I always go back to, where are the young people? Because I look around this room and I go, we've all been hanging around here for like 20 or 40 or 90 or however many years. And, and there's a lot of people who are here, who are working, who are interested, and have a ton of energy and, frankly, a lot more working life ahead of them to bring this thing forward. And I would really like to see some of those people engaged in this. I don't know how, I'm curious about how many of those people, Kevin, you and Amanda, saw in those roundtables, in those discussions.
So we have.
So I sort of took it off track there, Marcus. Sorry.
It's okay. I know that Nancy has a question on the other side.
Yeah, sorry, I can't really
I have
speak
two people lined up over
ahead.
here.
We'll go.
Thank you.
A couple people on that side and a couple over here.
Thanks. I can't really see very well.
Mine's just really practical. So I'm hearing that there's lots of good opinions about this document. And so what I'm thinking is, number one, do you want us to share this with our communities, like this document? And if so, maybe putting a PDF up on your website that we can email around and get feedback. And then is there going to be a mechanism for formal feedback, or do you just want us to send you an email? Because that would be kind of out of control. So maybe think about...
I think it's a great question. It's a terrific question. Do we share it? Do you want us to share it now, or should we share it now? Is there a formal feedback mechanism, or how do we, beyond the scope of this conversation, give feedback? Do you guys have kind of bullety sort of potential answers? Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll go up here.
Just overall, I'm sensing one really empowering solution for this. With any kind of research one does, it's always useful to sort of speak of your methodology and both the strengths and the limitations of whatever study you undertake. So I think if there's a little bit of a section where we explore that even briefly and say, we've already, I think Kevin and Amanda already have gathered some stats on, this is how many people we've reached. These are some of the different kinds of disciplines who are represented, the different kinds of areas within the creative sector. But, already we're saying, well, perhaps there's more work to be done over in this area. We could do further outreach. But that only empowers us to identify future goals. And it also allows us to sort of see the document within context as a work in progress that leads us forward and allows us to sort of say, okay, this is limited, but it's an empowering tool. And we now have anecdotal evidence that we can bring to the fore, and we've gathered information, and there's tools to explore further.
That's terrific. Thank you. And I also just want to see if we can get, is it possible, Rob, to answer that question sort of very specifically as well?
Yeah, so I think that we want to be able to share this document through our website and invite feedback on this document. But as Zaina said, I think it's really good to put it in the context of this is how this was gathered, right, and this is what's being portrayed, and is not at this point any kind of formal request to government, but this is what the community told us in this consultation process. And I think that's fair, and also fair are the recommendations about how we might improve the structure of that, of how that feedback is conveyed, as per Kathy's suggestion earlier.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. That's very specific. Yeah, there's people back there who've got their hands up. Oh, sorry. Apologies.
Just with the hope that this will actually lead to some action and response from the provincial government. And I know there's talk about refining and taking the document to the next stage, but I'm wondering if it would be important to have a greater degree of specificity in the recommendations. I think about some of the goals that are listed, and then the next step of recommendations. Some still seem to be very, very general, and my guess is that there were discussions about some very specific ways in which those could be turned into action, and I think to include that might just make it all that much closer for the government to act on it, because you've heard from so many people. That would be great. And just to reinforce a point that was made as well, the fact that there was so much work to travel around the province and hear from so many different voices gives power to this document. I think of times in past decades when there's been a traveling all around and forums set in order to hear many, many people speak from many jurisdictions. That does not happen that often, even though you might have some official channels of getting information. But those open public ones, so that needs to, really be used well, because that is part of the weight of the document. Thanks.
One here?
Okay, Kelly, there's folks over there who've been waiting too, but anyway, I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry. I go? Who goes?
Okay.
Me?
Thanks, Kelly.
I have been listening to many opinions about the project and about the document. I think that if we talk about methodology, this is the beginning.
This is a website. Can you say it again? Beginning. Thanks.
The methodology that we're using here. If we think about the scientific method, it's the most common in all areas in our lives. So this is just the collection of data. What we need to continue, and if we follow the scientific method, we know that now we need to test. And to test, we need to find a way to break it into cells that can observe and analyze the content of this document and put it in specific areas where people will be able to give their opinion, and more than their opinion, the way in which we have to present this. We cannot just go to the politician and say, hey, this is the document. This is just the collection of data. We need to know exactly which specific topics we want to address with them. And from those cells, we get that feedback from those cells, and then we have a more concrete result that can be put together. If we are just planning to send emails, or it's going to be a chaotic way of putting this together. I think that as a collection of data, it's really good. And the next step, in my point of view, would be make cells that observe and analyze and test.
Test it on its target audience or target market or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I can, since I live in Ontario, I can report a little bit on the Ontario process as I know it. I'm not an expert on what they're doing, but I do know that they are commissioning a company to do a backgrounder document and a discussion document is what they're calling it, that will feed into the roundtable type discussions that they're going to have in the fall. And Hill Strategies Research declined to apply for that project because A, we're too busy working with you guys, and B, the time frame is kind of crazy and I kind of like to have a bit of a summer. So they're doing that over the summer, the background document, the discussion document, to feed into their roundtables. I don't know that there's any original research going on as part of it. Certainly not in the initial stages of it. So I think you're ahead of them in that regard as well, because they're really looking at existing information. What can we pull together? What is important? What are some of the key questions to ask around the kind of roundtable sessions they've got?
Kelly, do you think there'll be an opportunity for us through the Alliance, I think, to collaborate with their equivalents who are, I know it's being driven by government, but is there any possible exchange, is there power in there potentially in kind of, not in terms of the research, but just in terms of strategy and those kinds of things?
Well, why wouldn't you, I suppose, yeah. I could probably put you in touch with a person or two who I've talked to about that project. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know exactly where the government agencies are going from there, but it is the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport that is driving it and is going to develop the framework in the end.
Great. So we're at 4. How strict are we on time here?
We can take till about 4:47.
Sorry? Rachel is here. Here she's standing.
Okay, so we'll take another 5 minutes or so. Do you want to do that? 5 or 10 minutes?
So, 5 more minutes.
Okay.
And then we'll have some closing remarks.
And we'll have some closing remarks with Rachel, which is awesome. If I could just, as we do these last 5 minutes of questions, because I know there's people who are waiting, if I could just ask you guys, Kevin and Amanda and Rob, to just think of a couple of things of these are specific things we think we need from you over the next year, in addition to lobbying our MLAs or calling our MLAs or whatever. If there are specific things that you feel like that we can walk away with. Okay, who is next?
Just a couple of things in terms of next steps. I just kind of looked through this very quickly, as everyone did, and it's really impressive, all of the voices that it captures. And I think the next step is maybe to further consolidate what those voices are and to find more intersections and interactions between what's there. There's a lot of, so the goals need to maybe be more specific, and the objectives, in some cases there's 8, 9 objectives and 6, 7 recommendations, is to kind of tighten those up, and I think, as Howard said, find those that information that tests those assumptions upon which those recommendations and objectives are based. When I think of specifically, there's a lot of this seems to be very much about instrumentalizing culture, that culture is a means of social cohesion. Now, it may be, but it may also be other things, and it has to be open and diverse enough to be able to be those other things for all kinds of audiences. So to say that that's one of the key objectives of culture is to promote social cohesion, maybe, maybe not, and I think that's an assumption that really does need to be tested with some empirical data. And then the other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't see this in here, there didn't seem to be a very clear statement about the rights of artists or any kind of acknowledgement of that. For example, there's a $5.7 billion generated in the cultural industries and 3.8% of all jobs, but the precarity of those jobs is something also that I think it's okay to say, hey, there's a lot of success in what we contribute, but that there's also challenges with that contribution, and to say that's part of one of the motivating forces behind this document and behind the cultural policy is to build upon those strengths and to further enhance and embolden all of the people who work in the cultural industries. So, thank you.
Can I just say something about linguistics? Can we use the word investment instead of funding, please?
That thing. Yep.
Thank you. Just really briefly, I think you've got a great document here, but the people that you want to get to, politicians, and after 10 years of working with them, I had to learn a new language, and they think backwards. So I just want to make it really clear. We usually put all the information we've collected, find the conclusions at the end, write the recommendations. They don't do that. And if you look at any document, any motion brought to the province or the city, really, your recommendations are first, because that's all they're going to read. I have to tell you that now. So get the recommendations at the beginning, then you have your supporting documentation afterwards, all the people you've seen, and if you're lucky, they might skip through that. So it's so critical. I'm being really honest here, and I've spent almost 10 years being hired to write for governments and getting those policies through. So you have to look at how they do it and do it the way they do it, and then they'll listen. They won't do it the way we do it. It's sad, but true.
That's City Councillor Elizabeth Ball, in case anybody doesn't know.
Is this on already? So, in addition to being president of the Arts Council in New Westminster, in my real life I'm an elementary school teacher. And I work with very young children. I teach grade 1, 2. And a big part of what I do in the classroom is I take words on a page, concepts, big ideas, and I find ways to make it come alive in the classroom and to create a buzz. So the children's joy and passion is unleashed, and they can't help but learning because they want to do that. And so at the end of our cultural roundtable that we did in New Westminster, we kind of all looked at each other and went, so why aren't we continuing doing this, right? So my personal takeaway is that this document for me is the big idea. That's what I'm taking away. And my question to myself and to our board, which we're exploring, is how do we make the arts alive, a living, breathing part of what we do in New Westminster? And so one of the things that I'm going to be organizing is a continuance of the roundtable, and I've gotten some really great ideas today about who to invite to that conversation, with the goal of making the arts a living, breathing, living, joyful, passionate part of our community. And so I think that's our challenge going forward with this.
Can we keep the mic over there and just pass it over?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and we're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon, so just a warning there.
Down here.
Could I just interject that?
Sure.
That very question has come up at many of the roundtables. Why don't we continue doing this? And I think that if we can encourage and support communities to continue these kinds of conversations, that will answer some of the questions that we've asked here about the steps ahead. And we're going to have to find many different ways to do that, because one of the things that Amanda and I now understand much better is that things work differently in different places in British Columbia.
Right.
So it's going to be, the partnerships across the province are going to be critical to that. But there is an appetite for this conversation on an ongoing basis, and we need to encourage that.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And this is going to be the last question. My apologies, but we're going to. I've gotten the big guy said so.
Oh, okay. Yes, I have a question. You mentioned socializing this document and getting it out to different groups of people, not just us, because obviously we are all on the same team and we're all on the same page. So what are the next steps for taking this? I know it's not a final document, but taking it to other conferences or other places where they're talking about. We want to get them to know that what we've been doing, not just the arts community, but other communities, bringing it to, I don't know if it's I know FCM is massive, but something like that. Do you have plans for that, to get it out there and actually socialize this document to get people's feedback and buy-in from the rest of the province?
Well, may I answer that? The short answer is, as with an earlier question, that's a really good question. And no, we've been so focused on getting to this point. We've been conscious of that question, but we haven't addressed it. We're going to take a break. We're going to get through the summer. We're going to catch some rays. We're going to come back refreshed in September, pick up our network of 600 friends, the new friends that we've made across the province, and ask them some of those questions, and move forward, as we said, to develop the strategies and the toolkits to get this to every sector, to every possible partnership, and all our allies.
You promised? Okay.
Promise, absolutely. Just looking back at my notes from 2013, smartphones are wonderful, we had, at the beginning of that discussion, discussed cultural policy initiatives in other areas of the world that were successful. And those included Alberta, New Brunswick, Sweden, and Australia. What were their next steps? Maybe we can look to previously successful models and see where they took this.
Good idea. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll talk to that. The really great thing to learn about some of those successful processes is also what's happened subsequently. Australia is a disaster at the moment.
Yeah, disaster.
And so we'll also want to learn from, what did they do right to set up a model system that the Canada Council was based on to a large extent, and then what happened that political sea change could just wipe it all out. In the case of New Brunswick, which we looked at in detail in 2013, they have now completed their renewal of their cultural policy framework, and it was rolled out with great fanfare this past year, and so we're going to look more again at them, not just how they got it going the first time, but how they're continuing it. And with respect to other engagement, I think there are so many places we can go next. We need a lot of resources, partners, contributions from across the sector to help make new connections. The municipalities are a great place for us to reach out because we have a lot of friendly partners already there. The social policy framework program for BC, based on Alberta's model, took the first step of just getting a whole bunch of municipalities and chambers of commerce and other entities to make declarations that BC needs a social policy framework. They haven't even done any of the consultations yet. They've just got those statements, and that's something that we haven't even really got yet, is those statements of support from various sectors. And we do see from the British Columbia Chamber of Commerce a lot of support for culture and the work that we're doing, and specific statements that come out of their conferences. And we can go to other groups that already are putting culture within their associations' agendas. And so, we need continued engagement from all of you to do that, because we're just a few people, and and we need help and ideas on how to make those connections. So we'll be asking for that.
Yeah, I think maybe just something specific in response to that is to say yes, and so we're on a distribution list here, all of us, like specific, and putting those out, what those specific requests are, I personally don't think we can underestimate the importance and power of listening to presentations that move us and affect us, right? Like in public, together in a room, and I would help you guys work on that, and there's a whole bunch of different kinds of things that we can do that way, right?
And I think that advocacy network is going to be a key place where that conversation can keep happening. So that we can kind of divide up the work of this and all be partners in it, because the more hands we have helping to make those connections, the more effective we will be.
And I feel anyway, okay, good. That's it. Any final words, brief words from you guys?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you so much to all of you for being put on the spot. Especially Howard, who apparently didn't understand my invitation meant sit in front of the room and answer the question on demand. I appreciate all the comments from the floor as well. Nick, I'm presuming that if there was somebody online that had a specific question, you would have let us know. And there's not. They're just enjoying all the wisdom coming out of the room. So we have just a few final words. A thank you to our sponsors. We're pulling up a little screen here. I'm just going to grab my list. Oh, that's yours? This is mine. There we go. So thanks to all of you. Thank you to the Roundhouse, to Metro Vancouver Max Guide, Access to Music. Thanks again on this particular piece of the work that we've been doing to our partners at Arts BC and all the partners who that filled up that slide with logos that Amanda and Kevin showed you. We resume again tomorrow at 9 o'clock check-in, 9:30 we actually start. And we'll be moving right on after only very brief welcoming announcements to Richard Evans of EMC Arts. But to close today's proceedings, we're very glad to welcome Rachel Rose and Vancouver's Poet Laureate. There we go. Thank you, Amanda. I'm really bad at advancing the slides. I was told at one point Amanda had to write me a little note that said, I was so relieved, no more, you don't have to advance the slides anymore, we'll do it. I also learned that I can't stand in front of that camera there, which is the audience view camera, or all they see at home is my butt. So, anyway, thank you for joining us, Rachel.
Thank you so much. I'm worried about that camera now. I'll stay away. Can you hear me all right? Great. Yes. Are you saying I'm short? Good. Just checking. Thank you for allowing me to close the Art Summit today. And I'm very happy to be here today. We're all here because we believe in the power of art to celebrate and sustain us all. Making and enjoying art, I believe, is a fundamental human right. It's our greatest potential, our greatest yearning, and our greatest legacy as citizens on this earth. And I know you've all been thinking hard and listening hard throughout the day, so I just invite you to listen softly and close your eyes if you want, and put your feet up on the seat in front of you if there's nobody on it, and just allow yourselves to drift a little bit. I'll read you a couple of poems. I also just want to say I'm having so much fun. Oops. I'm gone. Oh, I'm back. So much fun as Poet Laureate. I've assembled a team of poetry ambassadors, and we're going out into many different communities and working together with people of all ages, and it's just been really joyful work. So thank you.
The first poem I'll read is called Uncut Wood, and it was chosen for the Poetry in Transit, which was very exciting to me, except that I never, ever saw it on the bus. Everyone else did, but for some reason I never did. Uncut Wood. Before the poem mars the page, it speaks perfectly in the mind. Before the children arrive, they are unblemished and obedient. Before the president takes office, the people are hopeful. When oils gleam their spirals of burnt umber and crimson, not yet brush broken, the canvas is flawless. Crows snip worms, call crave, crave, crave. 1 foot in childhood, 1 in the grave. The way endures forever. A clean kitchen, scarcely an hour. Mortgage, mortgage, scolds the Stellar's jay as I put the breakfast bowls away. Blue song in the holly, sharp as joy or theft, flashes the crows on the wet roof. It's easy to get lost along the way. This morning, plum blossom form flowed through my hands, and from the net of heaven, rain fell on old snow. The baby chewed his mysterious toes, content with a single tooth. Lao Tzu, old carpenter, tell me the truth. What's the difference between want for nothing and good for nothing? What we love can always be taken. I'm going to read a couple of poems about bees. The first one is called Bees. The farmer asked me to host a hive, and I said yes, thinking honey without the sting, thinking do your small part and let the bees do theirs. The hive was a box of many rooms, hot with life. It throbbed under its tin roof. All summer their flight path hung its line of light across the deck. Those gold cells swam to the door of the hive, dusted with lust from blossom. If a wasp dared come, they were ready to kamikaze down, force the intruder out in a buzz tussle to the death. I crouched. I watched the stinger torn from the bee's body, trailing cream. Even in death, bees are never lonely. The hive is myriad. The hive is more than the bees. Sometimes I stood close to vibrate with them, drone of sun, pleasure of reaching beyond the limited human. Oh, stamen, pistil, I let them tangle in my hair. I hung up their flight path. Then came the virus, and then the wasps. There was no keeping them out. I crushed a few invaders before I stopped, stupid human, helpless as any god before the laws of relativity. The farmer and I could barely look at each other, and the leaves fell and brought winter. But can we try again? I begged, like a woman who wakes to a bed of blood. Can we try again? And the serious farmer said, of course. The struggle is all that keeps me here in this plague time where bees drop, the hive is cold, a few hornets drift, a virus drifts, pesticides drift over lawns lush as death, fields of strawberries so poisoned and perfect, one bite brings the sleep of 100 years. Can we try again? So I had a hive in my yard last year that was killed by that global virus that was going around, and it kind of broke my heart, but I'm happy to report that we got a new hive at the beginning of June, and so far it is thriving. I'm going to read one more bee-inspired poem. It's called Honey, and it was also inspired by the artist Blake Little's work, and if you haven't seen his photography, you should go home and look him up. Honey. The artist covered his nude subjects in honey, then photographed them. It was wasteful and terrible and unforgettable. Such varnished vanity, torpor of living amber cloaking the naked body, slow deliquescence preserved. This is how I loved you, honey. Didn't I fully and sweetly pour myself over you? Didn't you bow your head under that thick and holy light, that slow weight? No sting, only the glistening beauty of the moment captured, and after, unseen, the sticky, private struggle to come clean. So I'm going to close with one more poem that I wrote after the fuel spill recently. Not the most recent one, but the one just before that. Song Dogs. At the shoreline, dusk, 30 herons stand at attention, fishing in the rain as the spill rolls in. Waves of sheen on the water gleam like iridescent feathers. The ocean has had it. She sweeps it to shore, washes her hands of it. A woman in the city pushes up her blouse to feed her baby, holding his foot. Fuel. Cormorants already sleek and black as an oil slick rise to catch a sudden float of silver perch. Then other birds wing to the wake. Eagles and gulls scream their thanksgiving. After the feast comes lethargy, clogged feathers, and the birds that once claimed both sea and sky as home can neither swim nor fly, but stagger the shoreline, shell-shocked. Coyotes, scavenging, eat them, though it burns their mouths. First star, and we can hear them wail the poison kill, voices raised in broken hymn. Their other name is Song Dogs. They sing of migration, of the long winter where the only food was raw moonlight. Song Dogs, sing us the song about the ocean burning. If we want to save ourselves, if we want to know this place, like coyotes swimming the long, clogged channel between coast and damaged coast, where the only choices are death or change, there can be no walls between us and the herons in the rain. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, everyone.